be good. And if it could be, maybe in the long run, it could turn out to be the center for sustainable kind of,
yeah,
other than the highly intensive.
If we did that project with them, we would get noticed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that, that would be potentially quite exciting, really. Well, whatever exciting, it's not exciting, but yeah, opportunities,
Yeah.
and right. So we're live on YouTube, and I just put the link there on the page. Right, I guess I can share that as well. How did you get on with your meeting?
Yeah, it was really brilliant. We just kept chatting. It was more of a chat. I think you should have met is he Evans Adams sometime.
Right.
I think you could have met him. So we were chatting about the possibilities of any kind of programming that we can incorporate into the permaculture convergency.
Right.
And somehow we got to an interesting idea where we sort of hinted on getting the African perspective. Sorry, Steve. Let me pick up this person.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, so we chatted, and somehow we ended up taking the route that we are likely to have a session on African perspective where we can get in as many participants from Africa live streaming or coming in to do just individual contributions of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's still a proposal, it's still in the early stages, but he was excited.
I've been thinking a lot about this job, and what they might be asking me tomorrow, and but just the same as I think with our work is, we have to capture and tell the stories to show that people are responding in a bottom-up way and using permaculture. That's the way to win resources and support.
Yeah.
So I think that's something which we need to focus on.
Yeah, true.
And that.
And actually, how we ended up talking about the collab is when I told him about what we are looking at, the academy and all that. He's like, wait a minute, isn't it what I just saw in the newsletter?
Oh, wow. So that's how you got that. Okay.
Yeah, so that's when he forwarded it to me, and now I was, uh-oh. So I forwarded it. It's on your Gmail. Yeah, so
Well, I just put that screen grab that you sent me. I just put that onto the web page for today because this is the only way we're going to achieve things. See, yeah, yeah, cool, good.
Yeah, and it's interesting even to him, though he said, yes, it broadly sounds like a complex system altogether, but it's one massive project. If you know,
Yeah,
once it gets to fruition or once it gets into play, it's one massive project, and it it would be even as cost efficient as possible because you're having people doing as much peer-to-peer learning, and then they are interlinked. You're signposting people to the relevant persons or to the genuine persons, assuming we have the portfolios all set up and
yeah,
clearly validated and authenticated. Maybe we have the Bitcoin, the blockchain in working for that authentication and integrity. You're having people, a safe place for people to exchange ideas, but also to build their portfolios.
yeah.
And
And I've been saying to
anyone in
Darren,
search of knowledge, yeah,
yeah. Well, yes, and then to somehow incentivize people. So if you critique on each other's work, share knowledge and support or ask questions, is the learners then are somehow rewarded for that, for those making those interactions,
yeah,
with some kind of, in whatever way that could be, if it just, let's just say, to contribute to your diploma or whatever it is, you need to interact with so many other students, or I don't know, yeah, clearly that's how it will have to work.
yeah. All he said, it sounds complex, but then it's achievable though.
Yeah,
Because when I told him yes, for purposes of integrity and ensuring that everything is, validated, we may have to use either AI or things like blockchain.
yeah.
Yeah,
And that is what Darren is working on right now. Is a little app that you can, a plug-in that you can add to your WordPress site, so that you can, I don't know exactly, but yeah,
hi Caroline.
you can achieve that.
Yeah, so but it's really massive, and
Mm.
because however much the collab is doing something, but for them they are not so much into peer-to-peer learning or building up actual case scenarios or case studies.
Mm.
Yeah,
I mean,
he was
again,
telling me
yeah,
it's
okay,
more networking. Yes, there could be a little bit of peer-to-peer learning, but it's not the thing at the forefront.
I think for some people, especially like Western minds, is everything becomes an information network on a computer, and then actually, but is we want to change soil. We want it's gonna we're operating in the tangible world. Really, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, we want to facilitate actual changes. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'm understanding the collab a little bit better, but it's great that they've picked up on what I'm saying, and I hope that they've looked at the website and stuff and seen that there's something very exciting, very interesting happening here. Is because in the last few weeks I've started to get a lot more inquiries. There's a lot of people trying to befriend us on Facebook and what have you, and part of our question is going to be, like, for our design, is how are we going to keep this going, or what do we intend to do beyond the end of this course, and that I think in terms of this design project, as Sector 39, we should be really thinking about what have we learned from this process, how are we going to take that forward? And how can we sort of provide ongoing support for people? Because that's, you know, and what happens is people keep wanting to come along. There's people say, can I join now? And I've said to a couple of people, look, wait till we've finished and then we'll start again. But I don't know whether we don't need to. Well, these are the questions that we need to think about. Is we've now created all of these online lessons, so maybe and I've posted all of the PowerPoints on the as PDFs, so you know it couldn't be more accessible than it is right now.
Yeah.
And then maybe if people can look at the materials and then come back to us with questions and case studies, and you know that maybe that's how we build and maintain the momentum.
Wow. There is lots and lots of potential with this, and then it's one thing that fits in, because I was looking at it alternatively. However much we're looking at it as something targeting the African, participants and practitioners, but then there is potential way beyond. Even if someone is from whichever, maybe North America or anywhere, they can always tap in and maybe learn from that. Maybe someone is doing research to do with tropical farming systems or agriculture or regenerative systems.
Mm-hmm.
They can always...
I think we can all learn from each other, and I actually think you need to study different climate zones and different societies to understand your own better. You've got to have something to compare it to. Oh, right, that's the difference between the tropics and the temperate. That really deepens your understanding. And I feel like I've learned loads by, say, coming to the tropics, and it's made me understand UK systems better, because it's given me a wider context. I can see, because what I've come to realize is the patterns are all the same. It's just the detail that changes,
Yeah.
And as much, and also, there's a lot of people say to me, "Well, Steve, what do you know about tropical agriculture? What can you teach all these Africans about tropical agriculture?" And I was like, "Well, nothing. I don't know anything about tropical agriculture. But what I do know is the processes, and so I can and everyone who's in the tropics, they know loads about tropical agriculture."
Mm.
Yeah, so that's thank you for that, Caroline. I think we have to create case studies and understand those differences, and we're only going to learn from by doing. And the other thing that which we've learned along the way is that, especially in Africa, but it's true everywhere, is when you see it, if you see a working permaculture sort of plot, is you have this light bulb moment, and then you're suddenly full of questions about, well, how did you get there? How did you develop that? And that's very much what we want to, that's very much our learning methodology: demonstrate, educate, and then give people the tools to go away and do it for themselves, to replicate. Yeah, please, Caroline.
Hi, Caroline.
Hmm.
Yeah, unmute. You're muted. Okay, as we wait for others to join in or to log in.
We'd love to hear from you, Caroline, when you're ready.
Oh, let's see.
Oh, actually, that's what you're requesting. Okay, can I do that? I can only ask you to unmute. I can't do it. Frustrating. Yeah, sorry, Carolyn, I can't physically do it for you. Who's that? Mm. Yeah, Nicholas. Yeah, I think you got your thing came.
Hello.
Hello, Nicholas.
Okay, I'm sorry, sir. It's like I'm on YouTube, but I will want to join through Zoom, but I've forgotten my book where I've written.
Okay, all right. Let me find you the Zoom link. I think you have to register. So, oh, hang on.
Can you send me the meeting ID?
Yeah. I'll do that right now.
Yeah, because the password I have mastered it on my mind.
Okay, it's coming. It's coming. Okay, I think Nicholas is coming to join us. So. Watch out for that. I'll make you co-host as well, Gerald.
Okay, Steve.
Okay, well maybe I can't turn you on your mic on, Caroline. So maybe just if you can type into the comments if you, otherwise. So I haven't prepared loads and loads of material or anything this week because we are at a different stage really. So I wanted to have more of a dialogue. I have started on this. Oh.
Okay.
Oh, we can hear you now, Caroline.
Yes, I've gotten help from my daughter.
Okay.
Yes,
We rely on the younger generations to do our technology.
yes, and this is a new phone. The last
Okay.
2 times I've not been able to join on Zoom. I've been following via YouTube.
Oh, okay. I wondered where you were. Yes.
Yes, so okay, now when we are talking about case studies, it was also very interesting because this was my third PDC. The first one I did at Odienya. That's when I was introduced to permaculture.
Yeah.
Second one I did at Kindu Bay. So Kindu Bay is a semi-arid place. When it's hot, it's very hot.
Mm-hmm.
And when the rains fall, because there's no vegetation, there's a lot of flooding and washing off, the
Yeah.
soil in the lake. So what we did with last year's um, training was basically to try and prove that we can be able to grow anything on any piece of land,
Yeah.
which we did. But this time around, it was also very different. And the difference was that here there is a lot of rain, so it keeps on flooding and washing
Yes.
off into the rivers. So it was all very interesting because with the use of swales and check dams, we were able to stop because even when we were doing this, it was still raining. And
Yeah.
the ladies we were training could not believe that in just by the check dams and the swales, we managed to stop the flooding on the particular piece of land where we were doing the PDC.
Right.
You know, we even reclaimed some part of land which was badly eroded by taking topsoil from somewhere, from the
Yeah.
place where we were sinking a shallow well. So we took a mixture of I think the topsoil. We poured it into the gullies and we planted vetiver and planted some trees there, And today I was there and the vetiver is starting to shoot,
Ah,
So I'm
yeah.
just I'm trying to imagine in a short while the place will be green. But
Yes.
where there was flooding, the water was carrying off the topsoil, the vegetation, and the place was just, it was very badly eroded. But now you can see the difference
Yes.
just by the use of check dams and the swales. And the
That's really,
women
really
also,
interesting.
the women also have these same problems in their farms, not all but some. And
Yeah.
they worked so hard because they were like, we want to try and see if this can work. So they did it. And 2, 3 days later, when they came after heavy rain, everything was in place. Oh, they
Ha.
were so yeah,
Well,
it was yeah.
these are very big lessons to learn, aren't they? Okay, so I'm still writing my PowerPoint as we speak. Have we lost you, Carol? I know you finished. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, I'll start then, and welcome to you, Nicholas, as well. Yeah. As I say, I haven't prepared loads of material for this week. This is more about us now beginning to really think about applying these ideas and having a bit more of a discussion. So this is session 18. Welcome to session 18 of our 24-part PDC. That means we've got 6 more to go. The last one, and maybe the last 2, will be wanting to hear back from you. I want to. This all works on feedback. I'm giving out a lot of information to you guys. What I need to know more is how you are using this, how you intend to use this information, and how it's how useful it is to you, so that we can, build on this process. So session 18 we're still on principle 9, which is the one about small and slow solutions. Slow and steady wins the race. And we talked last week about how we're facing some really big problems and challenges, and we're going to have a bit of a reality check in this week's session as well, because we're going to talk a little bit about climate change and what's coming over the hill at us. And but in whatever form, we're trying to design and learn from nature to build resilience. And the definition of resilience is the ability to withstand external shocks. So we build up our little lives and our little communities, and then things happen in the outside world and they impact on us. How are we going to withstand that? What kinds of shocks might we expect? In what form might they come? How are we going to use the knowledge that we've been discussing over these weeks? There's no point in learning all about permaculture and then not using it. We're doing this so that we can apply these ideas and work with them. And in that process, we're going to learn as well. So, escape from adversity, designing for resilience. So these are the kind of thoughts that I was having putting this together. And so that one of the key functions of our designs, of why we are doing this, is because we're accepting that the external world is changing. We don't know exactly what form that change is going to take. We're going to have to respond to challenges, and it's much easier to do that if we can work together. So we've had 2 weeks, we've done integrate rather than segregate. We talk about cooperatives, groups, how people come together and work together. So now in small and slow solutions we're going to say we need to build strategies that have the ability to grow, but they start off at a functional level of small, that are going to enable us to respond to the challenges around us. So do jump in with any thoughts as we go through this. So firstly, I wanted to share this image, and this is a burning wicker man, and I put this in because we're just at the season of Beltane, and in a sort of Celtic calendar, and how our ancestors here in the West thought about this time of year, this beginning of May the 1st, that it's halfway between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. Equinox is when the day and the night are the same length, which for us, you've got to understand, in the temperate climates, that's a big deal. Because in the winter it's mainly dark, and in the summer it's mainly light. And at that point, when it changes, that's when the winter starts to end and the plants start to come back to life. At the point of Beltane, which is halfway between equinox and the summer solstice, that's when the sun's at the most northerly part of its journey. When it comes up to the Tropic of Cancer, that's when everything starts growing here, and that's at our midsummer point. So Beltane, first, a very early May, that's when we officially move out of winter and into summer, and when everything starts growing. So this is our main growing season here in the West. And the tradition that comes from our ancestors here is to entreat nature. This is when the people would have prayed, and they would have done rituals, and they would have done gatherings about asking for a successful harvest, asking for a bountiful season of production, and our ancestors would have done rituals that brought them together so that they felt like they were together. And so we're still thinking about things that are unifying, and as we face the productive growing season, we want it to be bountiful. The other thing that I mentioned, and what I think when I see this image is, there's a very famous movie made in the UK in the 60s, I think it was, called The Wicker Man. So this is a ritual thing. So imagine building a figure out of sticks, and then that representing something to you as a group, and then burning it. And that burning, if you like, represents some act of, you know, of devotion or of commitment or something. So, and the theme of, so the very famous, it's like a horror film, it's a scary film, and it's called The Wicker Man, and it's very, very famous. Like almost everyone in the UK would know about this film. And the story of it is, there's a community in Scotland, and the gods are displeased. They did not have a successful harvest last year or the year before, and they want to make changes. So they start doing all these different rituals, and they revert to their, if you like, pagan traditions. And it's a horror film, and it ends up with the police send a policeman to go and see what's going on the island, and the islanders decide to sacrifice the policeman, and they put him inside the Wicker Man. And you know, the film is all about whether they're going to burn him and stuff like that. So what that made me think about is, more seriously, is when things go wrong, when we face adversity, people can respond in very strange ways, and maybe inappropriate ways. It might be things that are divisive or destructive. And I'm saying all of this now is because we're moving into a phase where we don't really know what's going to happen, and we have to stick to, you know, real things, the things that we know work, which is permaculture design, not necessarily falling back onto superstitions and you know, past ways, and feeling that we need to blame people or demonize people for our problems. Okay, so there's a kind of a message in that which I've been thinking about, which is like, what happens to community when things go wrong or when things are challenging. So anyway, I bring my Beltane greetings to you, and we are anticipating a period of abundance, of productivity, of growth. I've seen lots of pictures of people planting as well away in there in Kenya and Uganda, you know, so in some ways we are planning and building our relationship with nature, with the nature gods, the forces of nature around us. And we're doing that in a thought out and deliberate way through our permaculture design. Thank you, Caroline. So threats and challenges. So this is a lovely looking mandala garden that I believe was posted by January, and it's all underwater. And this is what you were just talking about, Caroline, is we need to understand that we're now facing energized weather systems, and we can design and build our lovely gardens. We've got to understand that we're going to have to build systems that can, you know, that are strong enough and tough enough and well thought out enough to be able to withstand whatever nature throws at us. So what, and I don't want to belittle the challenges that anybody is facing, and I've had quite a lot of tales from different quarters where people have experienced torrential rainfall, and they've been very busy planting and growing, and then it's all been washed away. So this is what I have to say about that, and say not to trivialize what anyone is going under, is we have to observe. Chris Dixon, my permaculture mentor, said to me, you have to observe your land at the extremes of the weather. So we need to really understand what it looks like when it's really dried out, at the end of the dry season, we've not had rain for a long time. We need to understand what it looks like, what happens if we get a very heavy torrential downpour fall. To try and be fixing things when it's already, when the rain's already coming, it's too late to avoid the worst of the damage. So let's go back to our principles. We have to constantly be observing and interacting, because there's new information coming all the time. And if you've not seen what the rain patterns are like in a place, maybe you're a refugee, maybe you're new into a location, and we've showed you the tools: A-frames, swales, ditches, banks, strategies that we can start to put in front, raised bed systems, so that mixtures of annual and tree crops and polycultures, using combinations of strategies, all of that is what builds resilience. We're not relying on one approach or one crop. When we have these events, it's absolutely crushing to see your hard work get washed away. I understand. But this is going to happen again. It's not going to be.
Okay, it seems we've lost Steve, but he'll be logging in back shortly. Probably he's having a few issues with his connection.
Okay.
He'll be logging in soon. We'll be logging back in. Yes, Nicholas, how are you doing?
I'm good, sir. What of you?
I'm okay.
Okay, happy to hear.
Okay. Yeah, we have Steve back on.
Okay.
Sorry, I lost my internet connection for a moment. Were you having a chat? Do you want to carry that on, or?
No, really, we were just holding on for you to log back in.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, please.
Right, and am I recording it still? Oh, did it stop recording? Okay, it stopped recording. And we're still live on YouTube. Okay, right, sorry about that. We were just talking about threats and challenges. So I'm devastated to see clearly a lot of hard work and thought has gone into this, and now we've had a heavy rainfall and the garden is damaged. I hope it can recover. the lesson that we have to take from this is we have to observe the system, what it looks like when it's stretched like this, when it's been stressed, and then ask ourselves, what strategies can we put in place so that the next time this happens, the garden doesn't get washed away? Can we can always predict where the water, where that surface flow is going to go, because it's going to go downhill. If we're on very, very flat land, then we don't need to raise up very far, because the water level will spread obviously very broadly. So the flatter the land, the smaller the resultant rise might be. If we're in any kind of a hollow or shape, we need to understand that shape of that land, and we can then predict where that water flow will go, and we can make interventions to divert it away. Now, only you will know the subtle details of the site that you're in. The second thought that I have is, obviously, so water is going to flow on the surface, where it's going to go, where is it going to go, and where's that, can we, once we've filled up our swales and once we've irrigated our land, where can we dump off the surplus water and encourage, give that somewhere to go? Yeah. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about climate change and what it is and what we can expect is going to happen. And obviously no one knows exactly, but the evidence is that this problem is escalating quite quickly. So we have to think about it. And I think this is the most immediate, or the most kind of the long-term, all-encompassing threat is changing weather patterns. So it's been hot before, it's been dry before, we've seen lots of variations before, so that we can understand that. So this is a temperature anomaly that we're looking at. Here's a map of the world, and obviously the redder bits are the hotter bits and the blue bits are the colder bits. And the red is hotter than average and the blue is colder than average. And this picture of this temperature gradient map of the Earth is from 1976. And there's a reason why I picked it is, as you see here, there's a band of red right across the UK and northern France and across northern Spain. Look at that, there's like a red ring there. So that is hotter than average temperatures. So in the 1976, Britain had its then warmest ever summer. And it went on for months and it didn't rain and we all went on drought and we all had to save our water and be very, very careful, and it had never happened before. Well, not in living memory. This was a very unusual event, and in some ways, you know, we live in a cool country and a cool temperate climate. So when it was sort of hot, everybody felt like, well, hey, it's like being on holiday, or, you know, it's like the summer. But it went on too long, and a lot of the crops failed, and you know, and there were drought and water shortages and bushfires, things that we'd not really seen before, and there you go, 1976. So last year, 2022, we had another hot summer. And actually we had our hottest ever temperatures in the United Kingdom in August. It was 41 degrees centigrade. And in our climate, it's really, really uncomfortable when it gets that hot. And everything stops working because we didn't plan, we didn't build our infrastructure to survive 41 degrees centigrade. So things start melting and roads start melting and electricity systems start breaking and all sorts of problems. But so lots of people in the UK said, some people were panicking and saying, "Oh, is this climate change? Is this a a sign of the times?" And other people were saying, "Remember 1976? It was hot then. Nobody freaked out then. Why are we panicking now?" And the answer is, if you look at the global heat map for the last year, this is what it looks like. So yes, UK is red, higher than average, but in this, the whole world is higher than average. It's only, we've got a few cooler spots down here. But look at the difference. That is the summer of 76. That is the summer of 22. This is clearly something's changing. And look, we've got these deep, deep red areas, North Africa, over Italy, and actually down in the Antarctic as well. So the average climate change across the whole planet, the moment is 1.2 degrees, but that's the average. So there are places where the temperature is 13 degrees centigrade higher than normal. Very significant changes are happening. There are places where temperatures now going above 50 degrees. Then once you get above 40, plants can't really grow anymore. And so we're experiencing stresses like we haven't had before. So we can't completely protect ourselves from that, but we have to understand, when we say design from patterns to detail, folks, this is the pattern. We used to have, in 76, there were, yes, occasionally erratic, hotter than average events, but now it's happening right across the board. So realistically, we need to understand that the climate is changing. It's affecting us now, and we have to be realistic about that. Hi, Andre. Thanks for joining us. We're talking about permaculture and disasters and challenges and how we respond to adversity. So, and I welcomed you to our summer season with the Festival of Beltane. People, as a tradition of, anticipating the coming summer and the growing seasons. But our weather patterns are changing, and we're experiencing now our changing climate. And it is, when we look at these patterns and we look at it with, what's that, from 76, that's sort of 40-year gap, that's a big change. Okay, so let's not call it global warming or climate change. That sounds, climate change sounds like it's just a gradual change, or it's something that we can adapt to, and it's not. It's all normal patterns are starting to go away, and that is in itself, it's a crisis. It's a very, very serious problem, and I actually think that, well, I know that to respond to it, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take the whole world has to respond. It's not going to be business leaders or thought leaders or the IPCC making a decision and it's going to go away. What's going to happen is the world's going to carry on doing the wrong things until their systems break, because we've had 40 years of warning about this, and sadly we haven't done anything. So I've been looking into this more and more of as this reality unfolds. So, what can we expect? Again, don't think of it as global warming. Sounds like everything's just slowly warming up. It's like a never-ending summer. That's not really what's happening. What's happening is, because we've changed the atmosphere by putting all of this carbon into it, carbon dioxide, because we burnt oil and diesel and coal and gas. We've cut down lots of forests. We've allowed soils to dry out. We've allowed so much carbon to return into the atmosphere that we've changed the atmosphere of the planet. And that carbon sits in the atmosphere like a blanket. Energy from the sun shines in, bounces off the surface of the planet, and then is trapped by the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, so that, yes, there's an overall warming effect, as we saw in those graphs. But what does that warming do is it turbocharges the weather systems. It's trapping energy. Think of it as energy, not heat. It's energy. And with that energy, that's going to make winds become faster and stronger. It's going to push the circulation of water vapor and things is going to change. More heat means more evaporation. More evaporation, water vapor is also it traps heat, and so we're going to experience turbocharged weather systems. Some places might be hotter. As a result, other places might be cooler, or they might be hot or cool at different times of the year. We're going to get more extreme temperatures. Some places will be wetter, some places will be drier. When we have droughts, they might go on for longer. And when we have rain, we might have a more torrential rain system. So the patterns of things that we were so used to are now becoming erratic. They're becoming, we're losing the patterns that we're familiar with. So let's just be realistic that we're moving into this. And if the whole world comes together, stops all the emissions, and we grow back all the trees and rebuild all the topsoil, it's still going to take years to slow the climate effect. We're experiencing the warming effect of the 80s and 90s now. It takes 10 or 20 years before the carbon that we emit now, before that has its impact. So we're in for a rocky ride, folks, and we can't just hope that it's going to be okay. We are going to experience adversity, and we need to begin to understand that and to think how we're going to plan for it. So that's, we can expect things to be more energized, stronger, more powerful, more extreme. Hopefully we'll have periods of stability in between, but it will become erratic. It has become. So let's think about how that's going to affect. For sure it's going to affect our farming and growing systems. That's something that we're looking into, and we're going to have to focus more on. But think about the social impact. How will these weather events, how might that affect us, our communities? And the reality of these events is it's going to have an uneven effect. So some places might be almost destroyed and really suffering, and other places, we're fine. Might just be a few miles away from each other, or it could be big distances. So it's going to have an uneven effect. That's for sure. It's also, unfortunately, it's going to amplify the inequalities between us. Richer people with more resources, will be better placed to deal with these stresses. More vulnerable people are more exposed. The people living in the lowlands are going to get flooded. The people in the highlands might be okay. So let's also understand that this is not going to be a universal thing. And some of us are a lot more vulnerable than others. And, richer people have insurance. richer people have nice cars. If there's a storm coming, they can drive away and claim on their insurance. The ones of us that don't have those resources are going to be challenged. There's a very, very powerful example out there that we can all learn from, and it's Hurricane Katrina. Now, what year was that? It was about 2005 or something. I've forgotten now. Hurricane Katrina was an incredibly powerful tropical storm. It came off the Gulf of Mexico, and it hit the city of New Orleans in the southern states. And it was a series of disasters happened. So the first one was New Orleans is a city that's right at sea level, and there's a big system of water management around it with dams and levees and canals and a very clever complex system to prevent flooding. Well, that had been badly maintained and not invested in for decades. So it created the conditions, underinvestment, bad planning, created the conditions for something to go badly wrong. We then had Storm Katrina, which was the most powerful, I don't know exactly, hurricane to make landfall and to hit a major city. It hit a city that is at sea level. So then there was terrible flooding. What had happened, of course, in New Orleans is there'd been a warning, and people had been told there's a really bad storm coming. All the people who could afford it got in their nice SUVs or in their big cars, and they drove upstate. They drove upstate and they stayed in hotels, and after the storm had blown away, they came back to New Orleans and they filled in their insurance forms and they claimed their, for the damage. All the poor people couldn't do that. So they stayed in the city and thought they'd tough it out. And the lower parts of the town where the poor people live were the ones that got the worst flooding. So the people who couldn't afford to leave were also the people that got flooded out. The next thing that happened was then they were cut off without food and water for several days. And so some of those people then started opening up shops and accessing the resources in the shops. The American government saw that as poor people breaking into shops, and they called it looting. So they sent in the army to shoot at them. So the people who didn't have the resources to survive were then demonized for trying to look after themselves. And then the next part of the tragedy was when it came to rebuilding the city, of course, it again was the people with the least amount of money who got the least support. So we have to really think about this level of exposure and what it's going to be like as we experience these extreme weather events. Also, what we saw in Hurricane Katrina, and we see again, of course, is that the very support services that exist to help people in emergencies also tend to get damaged and cut off. So then again, is people are left sometimes for days or weeks to fend for themselves before help comes. We've just seen a really powerful tropical cyclone has hit Malawi. Areas of the country where people are subsistence farmers, they don't have spare resources, they don't have savings, their crops have been washed away, their houses have been washed away. Many of them waited for days before they even got blankets, so sleeping out in the open, and really struggling to survive, and getting small donations sent out to them, but so we have to think and anticipate the realities of these situations. And with permaculture, we have a strategy to organize, to rebuild, and to put things together. And so this is what I want. This is really the theme of this week's lecture. So we're going to disrupt our food systems. We're going to have, it's going to have this social impact. It's going to have an economic impact, you know, and even if it hasn't happened to us, it's happened to another community, that has a cumulative impact. So think about cost of food, cost of materials, disruption to jobs, disruption to trade and commerce. I was chatting to some of the people from Malawi, and they were just saying, you know, you can't get building materials. Even to a stone now has value because so much stuff was washed away. Now, you know, many of you guys rebuilding your lives in refugee settlements. Again, this must sound familiar, and got to keep asking ourselves, you know, what can we learn? What have we learned from the disturbances that we've experienced, and how can we bring that learning into our own disaster responses? So I started to think about how we respond, and we respond by organizing. So I just remembering, I wanted to add something to this. I am writing this slideshow as we speak. I'm looking at the that diagram again that we were given a few weeks ago, and I find it very useful. So I'm just going to. Sorry, I'm writing the lecture as we. So here we go. I've also got my little kitten here, and it's unhappy that it hasn't got my attention. So if you hear little cries, that's what it is. Slideshow from current slide. Okay. Hope you can see that. So here's our disaster response cycle, which we've had given us from our. Okay, so that, however we are in this cycle, is we move from being preparedness, we anticipate the problem. We need to have some kind of strategy in place to think, what happens if there's a flood? What happens if there's a fire? What happens if we don't have any money? When that thing comes around, we initiate that response, and we set that in motion, and then we go into a recovery phase. Okay, the flood has subsided, the fire has subsided. What are we going to do next? How do we rebuild? And as we rebuild, we mitigate. That means we start to put in place, we don't just fix what was broken, but we actually have to improve our systems so that if it happens again, we've applied the learning. So now we've moved back to being prepared and have a strategy in mind for what happens if there's a fire or a flood or we don't have any money. So think about this ongoing learning process for how we might deal with external challenges, things that we have, which we have to begin to bring this into our design, into our planning. So, yeah. So our response is to organize. That means having a plan. And one way that we can, if there's a challenge, a disaster, a challenge, an extreme weather event, a flood, fire, famine, we could sit around as individuals and wait to be rescued. Maybe the government will come and help. Maybe a big NGO, a big aid agency the World Food Programme might come, or UNHCR might come. Let's hope they do. There's many NGOs, non-government organizations that exist to support people at different times. You might have private donors, connections to the West, or people in other parts of the country who can help you. That's great. That's great. I call those top-down responses, okay? There's you sat in your field. There's the guys at Nachi Valley with their flood. Are we just going to sit and wait to be helped? Or the question I want to put to you is, how do we organize ourselves? The bottom-up response is, how do we organize ourselves so that we can meet our local needs from local resources? So, and then actually, by organizing ourselves into teams, into having responses, having strategies in place, as and when that top-down help comes along and say, hey guys, are you all right? You can say, well, we need this and we need that. You can be specific about what kind of help you need, what kind of resources you need. And if you are organized into a structure, that makes it a lot easier for people to know how to help you. So if some resource comes in from the outside, how would you allocate that? Are you all going to fight over it? I want it. No, I want it. Or are we going to have a plan? What I've noticed, and I understand, but what I've noticed is sometimes when these things happen, something bad happens, everything washes away, many individuals go onto Facebook, onto GoFundMe, onto those giving fundraising things and say, help, give me some money, something terrible has happened. It's very unlikely, it's very hard for people to know what they're funding. And the more of a plan, the more of a strategy that you can present to say, look, we're in a bad place, we're trying to get to a good place, these are our stepping stones, that makes it much more likely that you're going to win that support. And don't forget, don't underestimate, there's a thing called donor fatigue, and when people are constantly being asked for help, it becomes harder and harder to respond to that. And sometimes, some days I get 20 or 30 messages from people asking me, can I just give them a little bit of money to help them? And the answer is, I can't, no, I'm really sorry. As much as I might like to, we're limited in what we can do. January, I see you arriving. Welcome. Are you there? Yes, you are. January, welcome. You'll find I've used a couple of your photos in the lecture and the webpage today, because we're talking about how we respond to external challenges, to things which we really heartbroken to see the damage at your garden, and I hope you can respond to this in a timely and effective way. And we've taken that really for a theme for this week's lecture is we have to learn when these terrible things happen, when these extreme events happen, our opportunity is to learn from that, to build a strategy so that the next time it happens, it's not as bad. We can build resilience. So as hard as that must be to hear, this is a learning opportunity for us to build systems that are going to be more robust and more resilient to these challenges. That's how we're going to have to. Yeah, I don't know, Caroline. Maybe January can help us. But yes, these are photos he posted yesterday on Facebook, and I just thought, and there were several people who talked about have experienced heavy rainfall. They have down in Homer Bay as well. So that's our theme for today, is how do we prepare for these kinds of challenges, and what other kinds of threats can we anticipate? Because in our design, we've got to address these things. So we talked about, this is the hot summer of 76 in the Northern Hemisphere. This is the hot summer of 22. Understand that the climate really is changing, and it's trapping much more heat into the atmosphere, and as a result, we are seeing weather systems are high powered, and it's just going to push things to extreme. It doesn't mean it's just going to be warmer. Some places will be hotter, some places will be colder, some places will be wetter, some places will be drier, and we'll have more extremes of, you know, of all kinds of weather. We have to then understand it's not just our growing systems, it's our social systems, our economic systems. They're going to be stressed by this. So we have to organize. There are top-down agencies, governments, NGOs, and so forth, there to try and help people. But often it takes time for them to get to the location. It takes time for them to identify what their response is. So with our permaculture thinking, we know that we have to plan from the bottom up. And if we can better organize at a local level and have strategies in place to meet our needs from local resources, then firstly, we're more resilient. Secondly, we're able to take care of each other. And thirdly, when outside help does come, we know what we're asking for, and that those potential helpers can see that, you know, we've worked out what our responses are. So all of this is how we build our resilience. And I think this is an area of permaculture in responding to these events is going to, this is an area, a big area of learning for all of us. So think about this, the bottom-up response and the top-down response. And the more we organize from the bottom up, the better placed we will be. This is my little new friend. I'd like to say hello. It's called cat number 3. Right, and it's very little. So think about this constant cycle of preparedness. You know, there we are, building our systems, building our gardens, building the systems that are going to nourish us, and then a challenge comes: the flood, the fire. We need to respond. What are we going to do in those circumstances? As the event passes, we slowly recover, and then we put strategies in place to mitigate, that's to reduce the impact if this is going to happen again. So this is now the process. So I'm saying to you, observe and interact, build your plan for mitigation, put that in place, and hopefully we won't need it, but if we do, we then know what our response is going to be. And then hopefully our recovery will be more effective and more rapid. So here's our, this is our sort of, again, as our little model to keep in mind. Now, Would anybody like to say anything or you know, chip in at this point before I kind of go on, because I set this up. Gerald, any thoughts from you and or anyone else, or shall I just carry on?
Yeah, I would say, particularly for the bioregional organization model, I would encourage members here and even those watching and beyond to take a closer look at this.
Yeah.
Whether you're looking at it from a practitioner level or even from a project management perspective, is really, really a vital tool. It helps you, as we've said, to build your idea from the ground up, from the like minute details, and then build it on upwards. Things, as we always say, that organic kind of setup, you have the details, you have the problems, and you're looking at the solutions that you're going to employ to address that. That's the beauty with it. You draw it, it takes you through, it guides you through. So it's a really vital tool. We've recently used it with one of the teams that we've been training in Tororo, and it was really, it was a really vital tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Dave.
I can say that we lost Andre, did we? Oh, I might be dipping that. Yes, so I was talking to Homer Bay yesterday. Paul Agola, our comrade there, and they have experienced real damage to a lot of their gardens, and he's panicking about what are they going to do? How are we going to organize? So this is the thing. This is really a key question: is if things break down a bit, we're used to being kind of told what to do or having structures in place. If those structures are disrupted, how are we going to make decisions? Is it just the person with the loudest voice? Or we'll be going back to the Wicker Man and be making sacrifices to entreat the angry gods, where actually we need to put a strategy in place and we need to know how we're going to come together and make agreements. And that's what this this model gives us. So I'm going to take us into that, actually, Gerald. So as you rightly said, I think it's the tool that we've got. That's right. Okay. So our bioregional organisation. So I want to dig into this a bit. If you've got a template, you've got a basic plan, you will add the details. So remember, permaculture works from patterns to detail. The pattern is we're all the same. We're all Homo sapiens. We're all humans. We all breathe air, drink water, eat food, wear shoes, you know, whatever it is, the things that are universally true. But the detail is, well, you're in a different place, in a different climate and a different culture. So the food that you eat, it might be different from mine. You might produce it in a different way, but that's the detail. So here's the pattern, and this pattern is kind of true for all of us wherever we are, but the details are going to be different, and only you will know that for your circumstance. So again, this is how we organize ourselves from the bottom up. And so if resources, as and when resources from the top down are available, we know what to ask for and how to ask for it. I'm going to review this because I'm going to choose two areas that we're going to go into in more detail because we skated over a lot of it. I just introduced the model to you, and And I feel now that we need to jump into it into a greater level of detail. So here's the pattern. There's 9 sort of key functions as a community, as a society, that we need to have a plan in place for. We need to set up a support team to support that function. They kind of have an order, but we do ultimately need to think about all of them. Well, let's start off. Number 1, food. Remember, so these are 9 areas, and each one of these is going to have a support team around it and a plan. How are we going to feed ourselves? We're going to look at that one. Here are the 9 areas, so let's just recap that. Food, buildings, so food, shelter, livelihood, money. How are we meeting our needs? Because we need more than just food to survive. If we've got food and shelter, that's our first priority. When the storm comes, we need to get out of it. We need some shelter out from it, and we need to be able to sustain ourselves. Okay, those are the first 2 areas we need to have a plan in place for. The next area then is we've got to sustain ourselves in the longer term. We need to have some plans in place for how we're going to achieve that. Our livelihoods, how we're going to earn some money or earn more resources. The social function is, how are people going to come and join your group? How are you going to meet them? How are you going to connect with them? What's the process that's going to happen? You need to have a team of people who are thinking about how you're going to draw people into your group. Are we going to have strategies in place? We also, as a reminder, is that we were told that for this model to work, you need somewhere between 40 and 300 people. And that as you break down each one of these areas, you give people the responsibilities to work on these different areas. Okay, so we might draw in. Let's think about how we're going to feed ourselves. Let's build a team of 1, 2, or 3 people who are going to start that conversation. So let's those people get together and let those people feel empowered to start that process. Okay, same for buildings. We're going to, how are we going to maintain the infrastructure that we have? How are we going to extend it? How are we going to improve it? What's our plan? How are we going to develop the skills to achieve that? We need to have a plan in place. Livelihood, same. Social, how are we going to keep drawing in more people so our network can grow until it reaches it, till it's fully populated? If especially we're in a distress situation, how are we going to maintain the health of the group? How can firstly we avoid problems and maintain good hygiene and think about all the issues around that? Again, that's going to take a dedicated team of people to start to think about those processes. Information, another set of strategies. Community and security, another very important area to be thinking about. Transport. And then the final area, which is I also want to look at this week, is I want to look at food in more detail, and I want to look at future trends and threats, because I think that's if we've got time we can go into look into some of the others, but I think we want to take a bit of time to drill down and look at a couple of these areas in more detail, and then think about how we might actually do this, because I think that speaking to the Kenyans yesterday, is they're experiencing, it's the same in Uganda too, is that the economy is not doing well. People aren't earning enough wages from their jobs. The cost of living is going. It's happening here in the UK. Wages are going down, costs are going up. How are we going to survive? we're not just saying we're going to go it alone, but if the better we can plan and prepare ourselves from the bottom up, then the greater degree of resilience we will have. So people who have skills around food production might gravitate towards that food group. People who understand buildings or have skills of construction might gravitate towards that support group. People with more entrepreneurial mind or organizational might gravitate towards the livelihood group, so on and so forth. And also, especially in the formative stages, you might gravitate to more than one of those groups. You might be involved in two or three of them. But what we need to make sure is that as a wider group, that we're considering all 9 of these areas. Okay, so food, buildings, livelihood, social, health, information, community and security, transport, future trends and threats. Okay, so we had this lovely chart given to us, the author in Australia, who I interacted with a few weeks ago, and this really got me thinking. So he's created a map version, so we can see it in words, or we can see it as a flow, as a process. So maybe this is an easier way to look at it for you, or to see it as a list. But let's explore this now in a little bit more detail. So in this particular diagram, we've got our 9 areas going off this hub by a regional organization, and each one of those areas is then broken down and explored and examined. I would suggest that you start to do this for your own community and answer the questions within these bubbles that relate to you. So here we go, is food support. Here it is, here's one of the 9 areas. And look, it's coming off at about 7 o'clock from there, and it's inviting us to begin the process at about 7 o'clock from here. So I've touched on some of this before, but this is so important. We're going to come back and revise this and go to slightly greater depth. So from people arriving at our food support group, we can say to those people, you want to help? Fantastic. What is your area of knowledge? What is your area of expertise or experience, or what priority areas do we have that we want to look at? So when it comes to producing food, the whole food production process starts with plants, because it's plants that translate the energy from the sun into the ground and build fertility and so forth. So we need to build a support team of 1, 2, or 3 people who are really focused on the resources that we need for developing our productive systems or repairing them, or whatever our challenge is. So if we need plant resources, we start with a nursery. That's where we germinate seeds and we create new plants. Where are we going to get those seeds from? Well, we need collections of plants, don't we? So could we have seed stores? Can we have living plants? The plants that we're interested in propagating, can we have them growing around us? We can reach out to research institutes, find other sources for seeds. We can become aware of what native species are around us. What reserves are there? When you go out into the bush, what plants can you collect seeds from? What plants could you use for your process of rebuilding soils and rebuilding fertility and so forth? We can, as part of our plant resource strategy, we can now develop demonstration farms and gardens. That's what I see you guys are doing, and then you're setting that on in motion. So say for Andre or for January or for anybody else, is if we can start with your demonstration garden. As it gets bigger, We can add in more species, and then that becomes part of our how we train people, how we show people how to do permaculture, how we inspire people to join the group, and also it's beginning now to give us some of our resources. It's beginning to feed us. Once we have demonstration farms and gardens, and I think we've got momentum around the work that we're doing, can we now look to government departments or voluntary agencies? If we're doing something interesting, we should be telling people about it. That might be a good way to win support or to help share knowledge. Plus, there might be other people out there whose job it is to help and support people like you, what you're doing. So if you're innovating within your refugee settlement, within your community, wherever you are, and you're doing something interesting that is visible, demonstrably real. Oh, look, there's their demonstration garden, there's their propagation. Then, you know, then the opportunity then to win support for that. Within your plant resources, you need to identify who's got the skills, who knows how to do grafting, who knows about composting, who has, you know, whatever the skills that we might be needing. Let's identify who those people are and bring them into our network. So do you remember how we're supposed to start with about 40 people, drawing them in one at a time, finding their place, and then as we populate each one of these areas, our network might grow to 300, or a scale at which we can still effectively work together, but it doesn't become so big that it becomes dysfunctional. Publication and info services, you know, what information out there, what books can we access, what other forms of information can we access. Contractors and consultancy groups. Are there people out there who can help us? If we had money, are the people that we could employ to do our work for us, and are the people out there that can give us advice and support? Let's identify them now. Let's connect to those people and build a relationship with them. Hey, we're a community group. Hey, we're starting a demonstration farm. Can you help us? What help is there out for us? What information is there out there for us? Yeah, let's think about the produce, the products, the producers, what's coming out of our system, who's producing it, what kinds of things are they producing, what are the potentials of the system. Again, this is all part of our building a support function around this really important thing that within our community we want to grow. We want to create a support service around developing the right kind of plant resources. And this is going to be, I think, a strong priority. The way I'm now thinking about project development going forward is we're going to have to create a nursery. And from that nursery, we're going to create a model garden or a food forest or a system that's going to start to give us yields, also start to build up our plant resources, gathering seeds, and that's the way we're going to be able to help and support other people and other groups. Many, quite regularly, the question that we're asked for is people say, can you help us with some seeds, please? But it's back to this thing of, well, only so many people can ask for money or resources before we don't have any. So clearly, the long-term answer is we have to generate themselves, the resources ourselves, and we have to use our network that we are building right now through these interactions to start to notice, oh, Ali Tapendeki over in Butambala, he's growing vetiver. He might be able to provide some slips for propagation, or just we can identify what sources are out there and become aware of it and build that into our plan. Checklists. We can think about how we share this information, and we're back to nurseries again. So now look, these are all the areas we might want to think about, and then Imagine now you look at nursery and then you build a bubble around nursery and then you break down all the elements to that and assign people to those functions. So this is where the patterns to detail, it's you to supply the detail. Where's the nursery going to be? Who's going to be involved in it? What plants are we going to propagate? What are our strategies that we're going to use? These are then, see how there's layer after layer. And if we plan in this way, we're supporting key functions with multiple elements. Remember how right at the beginning of the course we said we identify the functions of the design, and then we put strategies and elements in place to support that function. Each function must be supported by multiple elements. So we've gone, the food function includes a plant function, and that plant function is being supported by all of these different sets of strategies which we're setting in motion. Hey, and that's just the plants. Once we started to have some productivity and we have a surplus, we can now add in the next element, which would be animals. If we start at 7 o'clock on here, is always we start small. Remember, small and slow solutions. That's what we're talking about. But we're through small and slow solutions, we're building ultimately big, long-term lasting systems. That's our objective. Okay, so we need to identify breeders and propagation centers. If we're going to start with animals, we need to hatch some eggs. We need to get some piglets, or what do we start small? Start with the smaller livestock in smaller numbers, and then build them slowly. Okay, so we can start breeding and propagating. We can look to existing species collections. Can we diversify? Can we find breeds adapted for our particular goals? And let's think about, we've talked about aquatic systems as well already, so let's just remind ourselves that we're not just talking about land-based systems. Look to native species, demonstration farms again, government departments, voluntary agencies, skills. Look, so a lot of these are the same, but we still got to check in and make sure that, do we have those skills in place? Are the people around us, contractors, consultants, people who have that knowledge that we could buy in or get support from? What publications are out there? What kind of produce are we going to get from our animals? And then next, we're going to need to have a plan for that. So look how all of these are things that we think about that support the function of having animal resources in our land-based food production systems. Okay, so we start with the plants, we move to the animals, and then we think about pest management as always. If we start intensifying productivity in a certain way, then we're going to create the opportunity for other species to come in and take advantage of that. And then we might end up seeing those opportunistic species as being pests, being our enemy, and we might be thinking we need to fight back against them, and we don't. So we talk about IPM, integrated pest management already. We're going to understand biological controls. So I've already said, if you get a profusion of a species that starts to look like a pest, it's because it doesn't have a corresponding predator. So we need to rebalance the ecology, encouraging the predators so that we have a self-regulation as a function within our animal and plant-based system. It says there's safe chemical supplies. I'm not into using chemicals at all. I think that, and I already said, the danger is that you, if you target a pest and you eliminate it, is then the predator species that eat that are then going to have no food. So you've actually creating an imbalance. We might be able to find biological intervention strategies that we can to calm down pest attack. But again, last week we talked about how when you have very healthy, the healthier the plant, the more dense the sugar in the plant is, the harder it is for a pest to actually take advantage of it and to attack it. So we need good information. Again, we talked about that last week in IPM, and an ongoing management process, which means we need to observe, interact, ask questions, use references and libraries, build up our experience, create checklists so we can share that information with other people in our team. And as we recruit people into the food network, we then assign them to look at these different areas. Each person can have multiple responsibilities, but just you're using this model as a checklist to make sure you're addressing each one of these key areas. Okay, so we're growing plants, we've got animals in our system, we've got enough balance and pest management so that we've actually starting to get our produce, we're getting yield. So then the next question is, what are we producing, and how are we going to harvest it? Can we process it? Can we capture it, dry it, store it, freeze it? Can we ferment it? Do we need equipment to can and bottle and to capture? But as the yield comes, so must we harvest, so much must we catch and store. And firstly, we're going to use what comes back from the system, the yields. We're going to use it to feed ourselves and to remember to feed the system that produced it, because we're trying to build the system, build its capacity. Okay, and then as we start to have a surplus, what are we going to do with it? We might start a little roadside sales. Well, we've got a little bit more than what we need. We can sit at the side of the road and sell them. That's the easiest way, or perhaps allow people to come and harvest it for themselves. If we want to send it away to market, we're going to think about how we're going to package it, how we're going to store it. Someone's going to have to be the person who thinks about that. So let's enable someone to be thinking about it in advance. Can we use it for swapping, for bartering and exchange? Sometimes better than selling something is to use it as literally as something for barter and exchange. Maybe that's where we can buy in skills or buy in new resources. So important to think about that. Are we then going to try and access local markets if we've got enough spare productivity that we're going to sell it? So we might need to think about delivery or direct marketing, or setting up a co-op, or do we need a retail outlet, or what other advice do we need, or what skills are out there? There we go. So we start with nothing, we grow some plants, we introduce some animals, we build it into a balanced system, we then start to harvest and process, we look to meet local needs, and then we also start to send things to market. See how this slowly builds on itself, and then with those resources, as we start to market them, we can then think about investing more time in, what have we got here? Land planning, the infrastructure like water supply, doing more analysis, residue testing services, fencing supplies. Look, as soon as we've got some money coming in, we're selling some of our produce, we can improve our system. We can have a glass house, a shade house, we can buy some tools, and so on and so forth. So we can invest in support services that are going to build the system so that we have more plant resources to offer, which can then give us more animals. And just, I hope I'm not over laboring this point, and I know that we've looked at this model already, but the more I look into it, the more I think this is really powerful, this is really clever. It's mapping it out for you, and you can look at each one of these points and then make a bubble around that, and just think about how then, as your system evolves and develops, how you could add layer after layer after layer to it. And it's just it's not telling you what to do, but it's giving you a direction. And again, is if we're in some kind of crisis, or we're having to make change, or okay, so what, I've forgotten the name of the gentleman who shared this diagram with us, but anyway, what he said was he's been working on this for like 20 years, and he said it's such a clearly obvious, powerful, productive way to organize yourself around functions and priorities, rather than the more arbitrary way we make decisions in normally. And what he said was he came to realize that for all of its strengths, humans don't really behave rationally and in such an ordered way until they have to. And when they have to is when there's a crisis. So we've known about the climate problem for 30 years, for more than 30 years. Have we done anything about it? Not enough, not really, because it's not a crisis yet. But once it is a crisis, once you get there, then it's too late. Or then you've got to rebuild from the bottom up again. And that's really difficult. So here we are, looking at this and thinking about, this is the building block of how we organize ourselves, how we build resilience, and how we understand that when the time comes, this is how we will have to organize around these functions, because we all need food, we all need shelter, we all need livelihood, we all need health support. These are the things that unify all of us. And that's what we're focusing on in permaculture. Great. I think we're probably due a little break. What do you think? Should we have a little bit of feedback, Gerald, and then a short break?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
If we could have about 5 minutes of feedback, and then we go for the break. Welcome, Shinaz. And Caroline, Nicholas, any feedback?
Thank you, Gerald. Sorry I'm late.
No, it's all right. You're most welcome. Okay, and yeah, probably Steve, maybe you could do a quick recap for Shinaz and anyone else who could have logged on a little bit.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Sure, please.
And don't worry, I'll watch it again on YouTube.
Okay,
If you don't need
right.
to, Steve, I'll save you that. It's maybe a very quick one.
Well, we're on small and slow solutions still.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is, we know we're going to face some huge challenges. They're happening already. Economic challenges, climate challenges, and in some ways, with permaculture, we've got to build resilience so that we don't get completely knocked over when these things come along. And I've been really prompted to think about that more deeply, because in the last 24, 48 hours, there's been torrential rains in especially parts of Kenya and over in, I think, around the southern edge of the lake. And lots of people's gardens and farms have just been washed away, lots of distress. And of course, I feel enormous compassion for everyone in that situation. But we're reminded that when we see these extreme events, in whatever form they take, that is an opportunity to learn. That's when we have to observe, interact, and actually stick to our permaculture principles and think about if something gets washed away and we rebuild it, we've got to rebuild it stronger. And we've got to understand have a sense of how we might do that. And I've also talked a bit about how the disorganization that might come when systems break, and we're going to have to organize ourselves perhaps from the bottom up, if that was to happen to us in whatever form that might happen. And we've gone back to looking at the bioregional organizational chart, which I think is, the more I look at it, the more I think it's really, really important. It's a fantastic resource. And the best thing I could say to the Kenyans last night when we were talking about their challenges is that's how you're going to have to start organizing yourself around that structure. So yeah, and we'll come back to look at disaster planning next. So yeah, okay, we just have a short break anyway, and I'll see you all in a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. And we'll be taking 5 minutes. So let's be back at 18 past the hour. So that's 18:18. Oh, for the people in UK. And yes, for the rest.
Sorry, Jared, I got the timing wrong. I thought it was, I was determined to join the live class and I thought it was 6 o'clock start, but it's 5 o'clock start, isn't it?
Actually, it's 4:30.
Oh,
But then you have people logging in, and so 4:30, and then about 4:45 is a safer
Okay.
time to get started.
It'll be another YouTube session for me. Thank you.
Sure, but we still have another about 1 hour.
Yes,
so
at least I can, yes.
let's utilize that. Sure.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Jared.
Sure.
Have a good break.
All right, because
Hi, sorry, my signal dropped off again. I am back. So, hello everyone. Are you back? Is the question. I have tea. That's a good thing. You can indicate if you're there.
We are here.
Hey, great. Okay, thanks everyone. So, yes. So, you know, Stella is currently doing her master's and, oh, she just vanished. She think I was going to ask her a question. She's doing her master's in disaster management, and so I just and I think in doing that, she's thinking more and more about how permaculture might be a very useful way of thinking of how we deal with sudden changes and how we rebuild from, you know, as a result of whatever of things that might go wrong. Yeah, anyway, let's get back to the presentation. And we had looked at the sort of the food going bioregional organization thing. And I think there's 9 areas to look at. I'm not going to chomp through all of them, and but it would be, I think, as a group, very interesting to look at all of those. And I obviously, for the model to work, it's trying to come up with an integrated response. So it's saying, look at all 9 areas, and then with each one, break it down into more and more detail. And start with the immediate things like, what are we going to eat? You know, where's our shelter? How are we going to sustain ourselves? And you know, health, and on and so forth. The 9th one, and this is the context that actually I wanted us to focus on: future trends and threats, because we're talking about climate change. It's a threat right now, but as a future trend, it's gonna get worse. It's going to intensify. It might not hit you. It's sporadic. It's regional. But imagine this scatter pattern approach of events. We're going to have to see those patterns and learn from them. We're going to have to treat each event as a learning experience and bring that into our models, bring that into our response. So now I've given you this, this model as well. We were told about how, you know, in each step of our emergency response sort of cycle, we're learning and improving and being more prepared, having a more effective response, which allows us to recover and to mitigate the impacts of that, and allows us actually to learn from that so that we are more prepared. And you could say, okay, let's get to this. So I have started following a podcast series online at the moment, put together by Roger Hallam. Roger is the primary climate change activist in the United Kingdom, as in terms of he set in motion Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, very powerful campaigns. And he says there's 2 views that are completely not useful and incorrect. And that one is to say, I don't believe in climate change, it's not happening, to go into the denial phase, because that's clearly not true. And the other thing that is completely useless and equally as bad is to say, it's too bad, it's too late, we're all doomed, we'll give in. The truth is, we don't know that. And what we also know is there's degrees of bad, and there's degrees of preparedness, there's degrees of response. So actually, as permaculture designers, we are seeing the patterns and we're building strategies that fit within that to build resilience. Okay, so that's what we have to do. We don't have any other options really, but that makes every sense as well. And even if we don't survive individually, we get washed away in the flood. That's awful. That might be me, it might be you. I hope it and pray that it isn't. But it might not be. So we have to prepare for the eventuality that we might survive, to create the possibility of survival and to create the possibility of supporting the people around us. So this is our strategy. So this breakdown of future trends and threats. This is the thinking of our colleague who shared this diagram with us, and this is how he interpreted it. I don't know, some years ago. Let's start. Where are we going to start? Let's start with the natural world. What future trends and threats might we need to consider from the natural world? Well, it says here, earth, air, water, fire. So it's all about it in an elemental way, the four basic elements. So I'm just absorbing this a little bit better. Okay, so, well, bushfires, soil erosion, wind, floods, and obviously we could have too much of something or not enough of something. We can manage landscapes carefully to minimize and reduce the fire burden. We can understand that if we're going to have climatic extremes, there might be times when the danger might come from a bushfire, and that's a real and tangible risk, isn't it? Earth, soil erosion, landslides. What we've seen in the west of Uganda, what we've seen in Elgon region, where you have a lot of deforestation that creates an exposure for heavy rainfall to wash away soils and then create landslides. So we can start to put together strategies to minimize our risk of problems that we might group under earth. And again, think about how you might then create a bubble around that and then create subcategories. Is soil erosion is a risk, landslides is a risk, so on and so forth. Air from pollution, noxious gases. Okay, now we think about water, especially within the context of a future threat of climate change. We know that the trend is intensifies weather systems. What's that going to do to our soils? How's that going to affect the air? How's that going to affect water? And the answer is we might have too much of it, or we might have not enough. We need to think about strategies that address that. And so we've jumped from function 1, which was the food support systems to support food production, and now I've jumped to function 9, which is the thinking and planning. This is the part of us that's this is where the brain work is going. It's identifying and spotting future threats. We know that climate change is going to be one of those future threats. How's it going to affect us in terms of the natural world and these 4 areas? Other areas we can think of. Do we want to add layers of detail ourselves? The more we can plan ahead, and that at the very least, the less of a surprise is going to be when these things come about. So things in this earth. What about things from outside? Is there a risk of extraterrestrial life? I don't know what we can do about that. Asteroids and meteors, changes in the sun, changes in cosmic radiation. I guess it's about damage to the ozone layer, affecting the quality of the light and so forth coming into the planet. So I think there's much we can do about these things, but at least we can be aware where future threats might come from. Implications for policy. So if we know that there are long-term threats, let's again focus on climate change. What can we do in terms of prevention, preparedness, response, recovery? There we go. There's our four emergency response stages again. So we can prevent it locally by creating more shade. We can prevent climate change locally by, we looked at 3-dimensional stacked systems last week. The shape of food forest systems that we might adapt, which create more shade and create something that's going to help regulate climate locally. We might want to be thinking about that, and preparedness for extreme events, etc., etc. Understand that. So again, with Roger Hallam's analysis of what we can expect going forward is, it's not just going to be the climate systems will stress food growing systems, stress natural systems, but they'll also stress our sociological systems. They'll stress our own relationships with each other. And that's another thing perhaps that we need to think about is, I guess what can we see threats to bring us together through common unity? Can we allow use these forces to maybe have communities to accept responsibility? That there's dangers that if things break down, we might see conflict, and what elements, what can we do to minimize that risk, or what can we do to I guess reinforce ourselves slightly from those threats? And these are all fairly dark scenarios we're looking at, but where are the threats coming from? And just ask yourself, where do we think that they might come from? And for each one of us, it might be slightly different. And for each one, it might put in place a different kinds of response. So technological changes, what might be, how that might affect us. Impact of mining and agriculture, attempts to geoengineer the climate systems. I don't know. I mean, I think if you go back to the sociologicals, I think we might want to think about this in terms of very much in terms of our own communities. Where will the cracks form, and around what ways or strategies can we use these stresses to bring us together to do exactly this? Is to start to problem solve and to bioregionally organize along this established identifiable structure. So our future trends and threats that might come in different forms, natural world, technological changes, things that maybe happen beyond our planet, impacts that's going to have on society, and long-term impact that will have on policy and planning. And having these longer-term threats in mind enables us to create policies and to plan for it now. The reminder of principle number 4 of the Holmgren principles, where we talked about the sins of the father are visited unto the 7th generation. How failing to correct problems in the shorter term has long-term impacts, which are much more serious. So we can anticipate and plan now to prevent things being much more challenging at some point in the future. Ali might tune in today. I'm not sure if he's there right now. He posted these pictures on Facebook today. There's the before and after of some individual vetiver slips going in on the edge of a road. And here they are, the established phase. We have this now becoming a vetiver hedge, something that's going to interrupt flow of water, heavy rainfall coming down a slope. It's going to hit the hedge, and some of that water is going to slow down, reduce its erosion, stabilize the roadside edge. That is the implementation of a strategy to build resilience in the system. We're less likely to experience erosion. We've put in, or Ali has put in a system that's going to provide yields, support, have other benefits to the system. So there's a simple example of how to think about how we might layer in different elements and systems into our gardens, into our surroundings. It's going to increase our resilience to these turbocharged energy systems through climate change and the myriad of knock-on effects that's going to have. So that's my presentation for this week. I've got another thing that I might want to talk about and look at with you, but maybe we could have a little go round and say any thoughts from people, what concerning you, and what strategies might you be having, might you be working on to help strengthen your own position, something like that. I'd be really interested to hear a few thoughts, because it's fairly challenging material I'm giving you this week, but we're all experiencing it, and here in the UK we're experiencing lots of economic challenges, is because we don't grow our food so much here, we buy it. So when climate change is happening, we experience prices going up in the shops. So we think, oh, it's an economic problem. It's a climate problem, but we're experiencing it in an economic way. And so these changes are affecting us all in slightly different ways. Gerald, I'll let you just kick off if you've got any thoughts, and then lovely to hear from anyone else.
Thanks, Steve. And yeah, this is a very, timely and vital session. It reminds me during one of my MBA sessions to show one of the modules was operations and major incidents, sort of preparations, to show you that even in government settings or organizational settings, they would encourage you to plan way in advance, or to even go as far as doing simulations. But maybe for us here, or for the group here, we may not have the capability to simulate or to do role play of some of these situations that may happen, because that is at government level. Actually, we realized that for things like even COVID and these other major instances that have been happening, they had kind of simulated them. They were already having emergency response teams on ground, however much it hadn't actually happened. But this is something that they had kind of a window of, or had somehow imagined would at some point happen. We may not have the exact kind of precision or the exact amount of resources to be able to simulate that, but maybe there are obvious things that, going by the current trends, are bound to happen. Droughts are bound to happen. Floods are bound to happen. Can we, as part of the resilience approach, or as part of making our systems more resilient, can we now bring in elements that reinforce? It was a good example to see the vetiver hedge from Ali, but then we can further now, it's time to split between the day-to-day survival mode or the day-to-day kind of livelihood support, and now reinforce the sort of resilience, because as it is, it's not today or tomorrow that we are stopping to have all these catastrophes or all these disasters. Whereas we may not totally get rid of everything. I don't mean to be overly optimistic, but then we have the ability at least to minimize the impact. Or how about we set up systems that give us a certain level of proofing? It may not be to totally eliminate the disasters or the floods or the wind or the extreme temperatures, but let's now start to think in terms of safeguards. We know with temperatures, obviously, the more shades we'll have, the more, the better. So growing trees now becomes a safeguard. So let's balance between, and also now learn to split between our resources, between the day-to-day livelihood support and also the resilience aspect. Any contributions? It seems Steve's broadband has has dropped. Any contributions? Stella? We welcome the master's knowledge here. Disaster preparedness. Caroline, January, any additions, Shanaz? All right.
Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Yes, January.
Hope that you are hope that you are doing fine, all of you.
Okay.
Due to the phone and the bad signal that's happened on my phone here, things went wrong. As you can see there, I've seen Mr. Steve shared the video there through what happened to our garden here. We lost everything. I mean, from the beginning up to now. I don't know what you have been discussing for or what. I'd like to hear something through what you had been talking about.
Okay, so basically what we've been looking at is how best do we put safeguards in place? How do we, it seems we've lost Steve, but he'll be back in. So how best do we now ensure, we call it resilient, how do we become now more resilient? How do we try as much as possible to include the aspect of resilience into our programming? Steve has been emphasizing planning. And, in planning is essentially vital throughout all our processes. We used to have a saying that if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. So it's either you're failing to plan and then ending up in chaos and emergencies. Yes, whereas some emergencies are sometimes unforeseen, but planning could as well help us to mitigate or minimize the level of chaos turning into emergencies. So the best or one of those tools we have at hand is how best now do we plan. It could be from the simplest format of it. Incorporate specific elements that support the resilience or the proofing just to minimize the impact of the negative effects or the negative feedback that we are currently getting. Stella, Caroline.
Thank you so much, class. I think I'd also logged in a bit late, so I'd not understood everything, but I've gotten from you right now. When we talk about planning, I think it's one of the best things whenever we think about disaster management, disaster preparedness, and trying to mitigate some of these things. How do we plan? First of all, we do, each of us needs to do risk assessment every day. It is part of our daily life now. We need to do risk assessment per person. Every day when you wake up, what do you think could be a risk? What do you think would make you to be vulnerable to have a certain problem? In your neighborhood, what do you think can easily cause a problem? We should all keep a watch, That alone will help us do the planning every day. Because if you cannot watch what is almost bringing a problem to you, then you cannot know, you cannot even plan for it, For example, if we have, let's say we have a risk of floods, okay? And we are not putting our attention into this risk. Eventually, we fail to plan for it because at the end of the day, the floods will come and find even you've not dug even your swales, you've not done anything to help yourself. So risk assessment is something very important that everyone should do, should look into. And then we would also look at doing a follow-up on, like, let's say, way back, how were the people living before us? The indigenous knowledge is very important because if we don't know how the people of that place used to live, we cannot manage to plan. Let's say, for example, when we talk about the Bududa floods every time, those people used to have bamboo plants there, okay? And that's how they used to mitigate some of these things. Landslides used not to be there in Bududa, but because of the too much consumption of malewa, people encroached on the bamboo. And at the end, these bamboos got depleted. So as a result, we now have these landslides, okay? So these are some of the things we have to look into every day. We have to have a flashback always. That alone can help us plan what are the resources we need so as to have ourselves ready, prepared for a certain thing. And then we also have to look at the occurrences in other places, okay? For example, it must have not happened in our place here, but we have seen certain disasters happening in some other places. It is up to us to keep a watch and say, oh, if we don't plan ahead, such a disaster can happen to us because we're just not thinking of how to help ourselves, okay? So learning from other experiences also would help us plan ahead of the time. Let me give someone else also to add something. Thank you. Yes, Caroline is on. Caroline, go on there.
Okay. Yes, Stella, you said something very important about how the indigenous people used to sort out their challenges. One, the indigenous knowledge used to teach us there was nothing like over farming. And again, we didn't have monocropping. The monocropping has come about because of commercial farming. And these are all very new. Let's say like in a place like Africa. Like among the Luo tribe of which I'm a member, we used to grow things like millet, cassava. Those are hardy crops. They stay for long in the soil, and even after harvest, you can keep them for a while. Then another thing was that there were lots of granaries in any Luo homestead. Every wife had their granary, and then there was a granary for the man, the head of the household. So usually the male granary was a fallback in terms of hunger and all these other calamities. So when people had to go to the head of the household granary, then you'd realize there was danger. You see. And generally, like some of the land degradation that we are currently seeing was not there because people used to responsibly, you know, look for firewood. Not like right now where people are just harvesting trees for timber, for firewood carelessly, because the demand is more than the supply. And then monetarization has made people are so interested in money, profit making, they don't care, you know. So they'll cut off trees just to make that money for now, not realizing that they are harming future generations. They are harming the earth. So those are just some of the things that we need as we are interacting in the community. We need to teach or to remind our people about the way we used to live before so that we can, go back to our roots and do the right thing as is required. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, those are very good points, Caroline. And yeah, if we're measuring with the wrong yardstick, if we're measuring our activities with do they make money, it's not giving us the right information. Yeah, thank you, Shanaz. Yes, thank you very much, and a very good contribution as well, Stella. And I know that it's right. Talks directly to your studies and things that you're thinking about right now. So I hope this is resonating with that for you. And I think, and it's so important also, Carolyn, I think permaculture also helps us value and understand that ancestral and traditional knowledge really was wise. It was wisdom, and then in embracing industrial agriculture, we've kind of been told this story that our ancestors weren't, they weren't doing it right. They did, we've got this clever new technology and these clever new seeds and these improved chemicals, and it's not been a success. It creates short-term success, but it's created long-term problems. And go back to the climate problem and everything else is, yes, Shanaza, you absolutely nailed it. Exactly the point is we have to keep investing in the system so it grows, not extracting what we can as a profit at the cost of the system. And on a big scale, that's how we've caused the climate problem. That's everyone in the world, or all the many billions of people doing the wrong things, has literally caused now a very big impact. And the only way we're going to solve it is by literally us empowering, and I'm talking about in the next 3 or 4 years as well, not some distant thing. It's the actions of now that's going to create the future. And I mean, going back to the information that I've been studying this week about the urgency of the climate crisis is we need to understand what we do now is absolutely critical. So how we behave in our own support systems within our own community that sends a message out into the world, a resonance. And isn't this interesting that here we are collaborating across many thousands of miles and different time zones, and translating these ideas and thinking about how we will, use them in our own communities, and to send out, hopefully, that resonance, that positive message. Yeah. Okay. And anyone else like to contribute on that, or I can bring another element into our discussion slightly. So I'm going to use this opportunity now to look at something that I'm working on, and just to share with you a little bit of this thought, which is so what I've been thinking about this last few days is so we talked about today about bottom-up solutions, bottom-up strategies. So how we as individuals and communities organize ourselves literally from the grassroots to support our needs. But there are also organizations, charities, structures out there which also that exist to support us. So there's the bottom up, and then there's the top down. And so in a very small way, so in the UK, to support the function of permaculture education, there is a charity, educational charity, called the Permaculture Association. It's permaculture.org.uk, sorry, permaculture.org.uk. So that's the Permaculture Association. It's an educational charity. It exists to support the function of people learning about permaculture, sharing their knowledge and experience, joining networks, accessing courses, developing people to become teachers, all of those things. Those are all the kind of the functions of the Permaculture Association. And it's also trying to take a long-term view of how might we develop permaculture in this country, how might we obviously draw people into the network, how might we learn from the collective experience of what what's going on, and how can we collate that knowledge and also share it with other people. Okay, so that's the function of the Permaculture Association of Britain. And I can say I know a bit about them, as in I used to work for them from about 1996 to 1999. So 24 years ago. It's a long time. But I've been a member since then, and I helped them in an early stage of their development. And I used to edit the newsletter and do the website and stuff like that. And in 1999, I convened their conference. So all these years later, Permaculture Association report that although they exist to support permaculture education in Britain, they increasingly are getting lots and lots of inquiries, emails and contacts from people in the majority world and the wider world. And that's because there isn't a permaculture association for, I don't know, Kenya or Uganda, yet, or many other countries they're hearing from. They've said, really, we're getting all of these messages and questions, but we're not resourced to answer them. And actually, our job, our remit as the Permaculture Association of Britain is to focus on permaculture in Britain. But they've then gone on to say, actually, we do also recognize that we've been going all these years, 25, 30 years, and we're now one of the more established permaculture networks in the world. And it's only right, really, that we can offer some of our experience and knowledge and overview to especially people coming from the majority world, from the non-Western world. So to that extent, they've managed to raise some money for investment to create a part-time job and to create a job for 3 years for someone to coordinate that educational function of the association internationally. I saw this job advert a few weeks ago, and I thought, hey, I might like to apply for that job. And I thought, I have a lot of experience in permaculture, and I do all of this work with you guys at East Africa. I might be able to bring something to this role. So I applied. And I was then told, since a lot of people applied for this job, 107, I'm told. And they've narrowed it down, they've gone through all these applications, and they've created a shortlist for interview. That interview is tomorrow, and I am on that shortlist. So we'll see. I don't know whether I will go forward. It's very competitive, so it's quite possible that I might not. But anyway, I thought I would share this with you because it is important, and whether I get the job or not is what's important for us to know is that this role is being created, and we might want to think about how, what support might there be out there for us, and what kind of, what's the nature of the support that we think we need. And you might say money, and I'm going to say to that is, Permaculture Association isn't a funder. It's someone who might help you organize yourself so that you might ask for money, but they're not going to be the people to give you the money. In the same way, it's not going to be me to give you the money for your project. We can help you organize to think about how you might go about getting your resources. Okay. Okay. Nicholas is leaving, and thanks, Caroline. Yes, well, yes, no, it is. I'm happy to even get to that stage, to be honest, and it is, and I'm going to try and bring my what I can to it tomorrow. Yeah, well, I'd be delighted to get it. Like, honestly, if I can get this, if I do win this role, it will change all of our lives. It will bring us close into the network and hopefully bring us some resources. So they've asked me some questions, to prepare some questions, and I'm only allowed to have 8 minutes to answer them. So, and this is a little presentation that I've put together to answer the questions. So their first question is, they get a lot of replies, a lot of international inquiries, and they give me an example of 3 of the types of inquiries that they get, and they want to know how I would reply to that. And just I guess my sort of warm up is actually at Sector 39 we've been engaging with many people internationally, especially since 2016, and was also had many requests. And so what we've done, the strategy so far that I have followed is through all of these many requests, is identify the key people? Who are the people who are going to be change makers, who are going to make a difference? And can we network with them? And can we make really basic resources available to those people to remove barriers, to remove obstacles? So help people with data costs, or help people with, really make sure that they can hook into the network. So that's what I've been doing. They give me 3 examples of questions that they get asked all the time. So here's one from Nepal, and there's one from Niger, and there's one from Zimbabwe. And I thought, well, I know a little about Nepal, and permaculture in Nepal is established. There's all sorts of networks. This is a project in a place called Pokhara, where there is quite a lot of tourism. And when I was trying to think about how could I actually help those people? They've asked for some support. They have a vision. I was thinking they need to be aware of other local permaculture projects. They need to know about permaculture networks in Nepal. Let's make sure that they are aware of that. And let's also help try and tell their story and share what they're doing and put that out there. Because a lot of tourists go to Pokhara, they know and know it, and it could be many opportunities around there for them. So can we connect people to wider networks, I guess? Second request is from Niger, and actually I spotted this. I think a copy of this actually came to us last year, and Niger, it's complicated. I mean, again, what would be the answer to say, how can I help these people in this very difficult place, challenging place? And the truth is, they need to come up with a large-scale strategy to deal with increasing desertification and to deal with nomadic farmers being pushed into settled areas, creating conflict and friction with 2 different groups of people coming together. It's going to need a large-scale intervention. So to achieve that, you need to have a sort of unified response. But the other side of that is you could create something which could, almost be globally inspirational. So let's think about if you could do something that's big and ambitious and in a very challenging place, that in itself might be how we get noticed and link it into networks. So I started to think about how I might reply to that and make them feel, not to raise people's hope falsely, but to what are the steps? What can remove the obstacles, and what are the steps that are going to push them in the right direction? Third question came from Zimbabwe, from the Ubuntu movement, where there's some really pioneering things going on in Zimbabwe. I spent some time there myself 25 years ago now, but I've stayed in touch, and we've done some training with some Zimbabwean people since then. So any project that's going on there, again, same answer really. They need to be networked locally. They need to have a chance to tell their story kind of globally, and help us understand the opportunities and challenges that are there in Zimbabwe right now. I noticed that this initiative is part of a Ubuntu network, which actually has a head office in Switzerland. So I tried reaching out to them and seeing what they knew and how we might be able to support each other. There's all these different international permaculture groups that are forming. I want to develop my awareness of those and see how individual projects might link in and benefit from being part of these international networks. So the other question they've asked me about is what kind of, how would we build this network? Clearly, we need to have a kind of international network that links people and organizations around the world who are doing or want to do permaculture. So what things could we create that would help you, that would help connect you to this and to feel that you can benefit from that? Hi, Andre, nice to have you back. So that was the part 2 of the question, and I thought, well, I thought about what we're currently doing, which is we're trying to we meet people and track people through social media. And when I see someone, say for like Andre or like January, who I can see they've got drive, are worth connecting to, and yeah, what technologies are we using is the question. So we're using social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, Signal, Zoom, and we're building blogs and websites with WordPress, because these are cheap, easy, accessible ways in which we can track and measure progress and build links between people. I think with more resources, I'd want to build a database that really logs all of this experience. And what I've come around to thinking, and tell me what you think, is this kind of session that we're having now is that could become, let's say, a monthly international forum. We could focus on and profile individual projects, maybe one at a time, or depending on how much is going on. But let's just think about is how we need to grow our permaculture network fast. It needs to be able to grow, and it needs to be able to support and empower a great many people, all around the world as we face these challenges and we are forced to respond to them. So we need to have regular dialogue. We need to have awareness raising of projects and ambitions. We need to have much more feedback, understand problems and frictions that people are experiencing. I think we have to link pioneering people together, just like we are really doing through this session. So how can we build on that? How could we link then that? I think the more we achieve that, the more we can maybe access sponsors, donors, and contributors. So there you go. That's my first run through of my answer. And I've done that a bit quickly, but I don't know how can you imagine the UK Permaculture Association could usefully help or support you? There's my question to you.
Peer-to-peer learning, Permaculture Academy. Setting up sort of a global Permaculture Academy. So I'm thinking having the peer-to-peer learning at a global level, and then also, just as we put it in the setup for the Permaculture Academy, allowing for authentication and sort of building people's putting together, let's say, people's profile, one, for purposes of them interacting with peers within the permaculture setting, from rather, because if I look at Caroline's profile, then I know that I'm interacting with Caroline, who is experienced or who is having hands-on experience in such and such a field, but also at maybe a project kind of level, it helps that should anyone looking to support communities, they would easily be able to run through the profiles and know, oh, Caroline is located within that specific community that I'm planning to work with. So sort of it's both a tool to empower the practitioners within our network, but then also sort of a market, let's call it simply a marketing tool, or a tool to put them out there, increase their chances of genuinely accessing funding and other relevant opportunities for them to proceed.
Is that your hand up again, Caroline? Please do go ahead.
Yes. In a nutshell, what Gerald is saying, we will be able to network effectively. Yeah. And, positively and progressively. That is very, very necessary. Thank you.
Did you get the question, Andre? And I'd be very interested to hear any thoughts.
Yes,
What
yes.
help out there would assist you that could be offered by the Permaculture Association in Britain?
Okay, let me talk some what I think, but I didn't understand the question. If it is possible, you can repeat so that I can be able to answer for the question. But I was somewhere. My neighbors.
Yes.
Yeah, a child is died right now, so I was going to visit them.
Yeah.
And I back.
Okay, so I'm very sorry for the loss. Yeah. So the question is, the UK in Britain there is a charity called the Permaculture Association, and their job is to support permaculture education in Britain, and they're quite established now. And what they have said is they're now starting to get lots of questions from especially East Africa, but from around the world. And what they said is it's not really their responsibility. It's not their job to answer those questions because they exist for Britain. That's the purpose of the charity. But they've managed to raise some resources, some money, so that they can create a job so that someone can now begin to have a responsibility of supporting people internationally. I am applying for that job. And the question that they want me to answer is, what support would, say, someone like you be looking for from an organization such as that? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. What I can say on that, as we are in the group and we have our goal, we have ideas that we are sharing in the group, and every organization has the ideas and vision. So to get funds or support for the organization, it depends on the work that you are working. And my suggestion on it is, there's like in our organization, my organization here in Kakuma, we are looking for people who can support the group, and we do our activity, because for now we are contributing money for membership, and we just buying some seeds, some items of our group. So you can't go ahead with your organization without being supported with someone. And on that, if it could be better for us to organize a Facebook group or a Facebook page and website, so that we can see in which way we can get funds to support each organization in that group, because we have, as in Kenya, Kakuma, with some of us, they are in Uganda, and maybe there are others, they are outside Kenya. So that is my suggestion, if it is possible. But any organization can't be they can't go ahead without being supported. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. There's some very good points there. And I think, yes, making information available in certain key places, Facebook groups, and also I'm saying WordPress blogs like the Academy website. And you could tell me if that is, I know that it's easiest for you guys to access things on Facebook because of the way that your bundles are configured, and it's different for different apps different applications work in different contexts or different groups. So I'm trying to understand that as well. But I hope that you are able to access the Academy website and that working on for you, because that's something I think I want to develop that as a communication tool for the network.
Yeah, we can do like, you know, I have.
Oh, again, no. Hmm. Oh, was that? I wasn't sure if that was me had frozen or if it was January. Oh no, it was, sorry, Andre.
It's Andre. We've actually lost him.
Okay, all right, okay. And any closing thoughts? We've got just a few minutes left. Thank you for your thoughts on that. It's actually and your encouragement. And whatever happens, I'm trying to be philosophical. If someone else gets it, then that means that there's someone else in that position who we can, approach and work with. I hope it is me though, because I think I could really contribute with that. Yeah. Anyway, enough of that. Any closing thoughts? We'll have a little go around. If anyone wants to say anything or anything at all, any questions, or just your own summary or thoughts.
Oh, Karen, please go on.
Okay. I'm happy to be back. You know, I followed the last two sessions on YouTube, and it was quite frustrating. Sometimes I wanted to comment and I couldn't. But today, I've really enjoyed the class as always, and I'm thanking everybody who's had the time to be able to come to class. This particular initiative has been a very good one because it has reached many people like myself who may not have had a chance to learn from the master himself. I'm thankful and I'm grateful for the interaction. Thank you all.
Thanks, Caroline. Oh, okay. Yes, Shinas, you're welcome. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name right.
Hi. I'm sorry that I don't always make it to class, but I do catch up all the lectures on YouTube. And also, I'd like to say, listening to all your experiences from Africa makes me feel, in a way, I live in an urban setting, and I know we must apply the principles to every area, whatever lives we lead, as far as possible. And so that is what I've been trying to do. And I've been interested in permaculture for a long time, from when my hair was black, not white, but actually didn't sort of actively participate. And I've come to it very late, and I helped to raise some money so more people could participate from Africa, because I feel very strongly about it. And I'm sorry if I keep quiet and I don't contribute, but I do listen. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, Gerard, as well, and Steve, of course, and to wish him every luck tomorrow. We really wish that you will get this this position, but you always have a philosophical approach, and let's see what the universe provides. So thank you again. Thank you to Stella, to Caroline, to Deborah, to Andre, and to everybody who always are part of the class. And I'll try and be a part of the live class because it does make a big difference. So thank you.
Thanks, Shinaz. Over to you, Steve. It couldn't end at a better note than that. Unless anyone else has any other thoughts, but all the best. And yeah, you're the best man for the position.
Okay.
So, yes.
Thank you. Really nice to have your contribution, Shanaz. We welcome that tremendously. And yes, it's good to have the live sessions and to be there for the live session. And I'm going to be preparing and putting out, less material each time now for our final sessions, and really want us to feed back from our own experiences and to collate that. And actually, we'll see what happens, but we're also going to make our plans about how we're going to proceed forward as an Academy of Permaculture, how we're going to better support each other, share each other's knowledge, and use that to accelerate, to work towards our goal. And Sector 39's goal is to bring permaculture to new areas, to accelerate learning, and to create a mechanism for people to feed back and share their experience. And we're doing it, guys, it's happening. So I'll take your well wishes and the momentum from these sessions, and I shall try and bring it all to life tomorrow in my interview. And we shall see. Anyway, onwards and upwards. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this. And I'll see you all next week, if not before.
Good luck, Steve. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Yeah. Good night, everyone.
I love you all. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.